I'm here again with Rick Weinecke on part two of a conversation where Rick is sharing about his experiences, especially earlier in his life, in how he began to communicate, interact with the Lord began to communicate with him. In the first segment, Rick shared about how he came to Israel and the moment in which God began to initiate conversation, if I can call it that, or interaction with him. And he had received a specific statement, I'll call it, from the Lord, pointing him to look at a particular part of the scripture in Isaiah 14, a passage that Rick was not familiar with, and in fact had very little orientation to. And yet, as he's in the midst of it, making an important life decision that would change his course one way or the other, depending upon how he decided, the Lord speaks this Isaiah 14. Rick began to interact with it, and then he began to look for, ask the Lord for confirmation for making this major shift. Anything you want to add to that, Rick, before you go on and talk about this confirmation?
No,
Okay.
no, it's good.
Now, again, why? Just say again why did you felt this confirmation was important for you?
For me, I look at it and I think to myself, sometimes we can, in all of our desires, especially what I found over the years, it's been the idea of anything involved with romance and with money.
Okay.
We can imagine the Lord saying stuff to us and using it as a justification for certain decisions that we're doing. Okay. But what I've seen over the years again and again, it's almost like before I step into a response to something that I feel like the Lord is saying to me, I'm always asking him to earth it, to somehow confirm it to me so that I can now begin to walk in it.
Right.
Because I look at it, it isn't just a communication that is, like sometimes the Lord will just say really nice stuff to us, to either confirm, just to say he loves us, or somehow to confirm who we are to him, say. And these are all really nice things, or it can be a rebuke, and he can let us know where we're a little off and all this stuff. But everything demands a response, but a directional thing, a thing that we're about to not only listen to and try and understand it in our intellect, say, but it's something that demands a response. And it will become then a part of who we are.
Right.
Because we're somehow, I think even then, it was like, I had this sense that we have to become in a way where it's like we represent on earth what his desires are in heaven. And in a way, we're not here to represent ourselves anymore. We're here to represent him.
Right.
And so, in a way, it's like I want to be sure that this is him, because I found that almost every response to the Lord or to a communication that I feel like is from the Lord, it's going to cost me something.
Okay.
And it's like, I want to be able to be faithful to what he's saying to me, but I want to know for sure that it's him saying it. And then I'm fully willing to, in a sense, die to my own nature, die to what I think is the right thing to do or the right direction, and make generally a step that you're not sure where it's going to go, but you're making a step into the dark. But while you're walking out the response, it's almost like you need a place within that walk to be able to look back and remember that I asked the Lord for confirmation and he confirmed it. So I'm going to make another step towards this. I'm going to keep going, even though I can't see what the result is in any kind of an immediate way, say. And sometimes it's costing you stuff, even making the initial steps. But you want to be able to go back into the relationship with the Lord and say, I remember, I know that you spoke this to me. And so I'm willing to take whatever comes down the pipe.
Yeah.
Somehow.
So
God gives us.
In this whole interaction with this young lady, both of you young people at this point, young adults at this point, had it ever entered into your mind that this thing, as you made plans to go to Germany, that these plans might not ever happen? Did that ever enter your mind until God said Isaiah 14?
No.
Okay.
No.
So it was, you were headed on, you could see how it was going to end up, you're already thinking about what your future might be like, where it might take you, and so forth, okay?
Right.
The Lord interrupts that.
Right.
Okay, and he doesn't interrupt it just by saying, he doesn't say don't do that. He shows you a picture of what his future is for you.
Right.
In a way, it's not a complete picture yet.
No.
Okay?
See, in a way, because you don't know.
You don't know
that decision is, for me personally, I look at it and I think, this affected the next 42 years of my life.
That's right. Everything flows out of it.
Do you know that then? No, because we'd all freak out if the Lord told us too much.
Well, that's right. And the thing is that this wasn't just your decision. It was two of you. It was a shared decision, and you both agreed about how you were going to ask the Lord to confirm it or look for a confirmation. And I find that very interesting. But the key is that you didn't know how high risk it was at this moment. Okay? No. And you don't have to know. You don't have to know. And that it would change all the plans. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to know that either. You just have to know, what is my next step?
Exactly.
And your next step was to go to the Bureau
Ministry of Interior.
Ministry of Interior, to try to find out if you could get some kind of temporary resident status, and a step above the tourist status, so that you could stay in the land.
But not only that. See, I kept looking at it as, okay, I want to respond somehow to this interaction that happened to me in the middle of the night. I genuinely, I'm fascinated with the possibility of God being able to communicate. But on the other hand, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, this is like, I'm hoping, on one hand, it's like a win-win situation. I'm thinking, if the expected thing is they'll turn it down for sure, because you're not a Jew. This is not, it's not the land of the Gentiles, it's the land of the Jews. And so in a sense, if they turn me down, I will have felt that I have responded to what happened to me in the middle of the night, and it didn't get confirmed. So this is good. I'm on my way to Germany.
Everything's okay. This is really like, Moses' encounter at the burning bush. First thing God tells him is, take your shoes off. He doesn't tell him why. Okay, this is really the rest of his life now is based on whether he takes his shoes off.
Right.
Because if he doesn't take his shoes off, this thing goes a different direction. You see? So that's the same case for you.
This is the heart. This is the heart of a father speaking to a child.
Right.
He's trying to get the child to hear his voice, to understand that this is how he does things.
Right.
With the hope that all he's asking from the child is to take a step. Just take a step.
You don't have to understand the next 40 years.
You don't have to understand, because you're not going to be able to understand it anyway.
That's right.
It's like, our capacity to overload our brain is like, it's a short fuse for sure. It doesn't take much. And it's like, this is God trying to teach us that he wants to have this access to who we are, but he's going to do it gently, and he's going to just ask us to just take a step, take one step. It doesn't even matter if you fall down. He's there to pick it up. Right. Because I thought, even it turned out to be nothing and they threw me out of the office, I would have felt satisfied that he knows I'm taking him serious enough to derail my plans. But if it doesn't turn out, that's fine. At least I've done this. I want him to know that he's first. Right. And so I'm willing to look stupid or make a mistake or somebody yell at you in the office that, what are you doing here, whatever, and all this stuff. But I'm thinking, no, it was a reasonable sense of confirming this, because everything would say in the natural that it's completely impossible. Right. As much as we knew about that, we knew a little bit more about that. So it was.
Right. Now, for a lot of people, when they get to this point where they're wanting to go a particular direction, and then God does something like he did with you, saying Isaiah 14, okay, that kind of puts a temporary halt to something, or a directional change to something. See, what you don't know at this point, it could still all go the same direction. You're just going to find out for sure if that's the direction it needs to go. Right. But a lot of people at this point, they're afraid. They're afraid that God's out to spoil their direction. Okay? That God wants them to suffer. That God wants them, there are whole groups of Christianity that believe that God always wants to take you this route, to take something away from you. Okay? Because in the end, at least you'll go to heaven when you die. Okay? Right. All right? You didn't have that kind of perspective. What was the difference for you?
There was, again, it always came down to the place where I'm intrigued and afraid. Okay. But most of the time, I'm more intrigued than I am afraid. Okay. So I'm willing to take the step, because I'm thinking, I always felt in my mind this reality of trying to discover who God is has to be more real than my life as a drunk and a druggie and all this, because that was very real. It was like there was lots of. Then in my analysis of my life, lots of times I was having a really good time. Oh, I could tell all kinds of stories about stupid stuff that I did, but it was very real. There was a reality of what that was. But I thought, if I'm searching for God, there was this sense that he has to be tangible. He has to be there. Or what's the point? Right. I'm not going to sign up for boredom once a week or whatever, for a couple hours that for me is the suffering part. Yeah. Because I'm thinking, if he's this artist, I kept on thinking I could concoct all kinds of adventures, imagine adventures, that I would do these things. But I began to realize that God's capacity for adventures makes mine look like totally boring. And so in a way, there was this sense, I want to give myself over to him. I'm tired of being Lord of my own life. The results were evident of what was happening in my life previous to this searching for God and now being pulled, and now I'm on a kibbutz in Israel. Yeah. I'm thinking, this is pretty wild.
No, it's a wild picture.
It's a wild picture, and I'm thinking, if this is the beginning of the God that I'm following, this is going to be a wild ride.
Okay, so you're at this point of great risk. Okay,
Right,
and I'll put it this way, because both directions are unknown, the risk is
right,
basically the same. It's
right,
one way is just as risky as the other. One way you might lose one thing, gain another, and the other same thing, vice versa. So
right,
it's at a high risk point. Okay,
right,
and part of what I hear you saying, just in general, is that there's always going with God. Okay, and making the decisions to listen to God and move with God, it's always going to bring us to these kinds of risk points.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I
If
mean,
it's a reality
if it's
decision.
reality, yeah, because one of the things that the enemy challenged, the serpent challenged Adam and Eve in the garden about was about the risk.
Right,
What they were going to lose by listening to God versus what they might gain by listening to what He was telling them.
right,
Okay, so this is always the conflict, isn't it?
right.
And what's interesting about it is that God doesn't talk about all that you're going to gain or lose in the end. He talks about the next decision point.
Right.
And so he doesn't take, since he has in his hands all the endpoints, the endpoint isn't the big deal. It's always the next decision, the next point, the next move, the next risk. And your risk was about this citizenship status. Now,
Right.
we don't have a lot of time left in this segment to really to tell a full story on this. At some point, I want you to share that because it's very entertaining. Okay, I think. Okay, it's a great story, and I love it. And
I love it too. I love remembering it.
well, but just break it down into its rudimentary parts. What took place in this confirmation? Can you do that?
Okay, I'll try my best. It's like, so the intention then that this would be a confirmation that this is the Lord or a non-confirmation.
Right.
And so I end up making the trip to the Ministry of Interiors. And because I'm tourist status and wanting to change that somehow, it wasn't the normal procedure. And I had to meet with somebody, actually have an appointment.
Yeah.
So I had the appointment with a woman who was the official. She would have been one of the managers, say. And so she asked me. She was very abrupt, very impatient, irritable, like just wanted me in and out of there, basically. That was the impression. And so I came in and I said to her, well, she said, what do you want? And I said, well, I want to ask for temporary residency. And she looked at me and immediately said, well, you're not a Jew. You don't get residency here. And I'm going, okay, no, I understand that. I totally understand that. But the request is a piece of paper, right? I said, I just want to fill out the piece of paper. And she said, but you're not allowed to fill out the piece of paper, and I'm the one who decides. I am the authority. And I'm like, okay, but it's just a piece of paper. All I want to do is fill it out. And so she then comes back and she said, they will turn you down. It'll go to Jerusalem, you'll get the request, and they'll turn you down. And so I said to her, it's okay. I take rejection well. No problem. It's not going to bother me. And it's like, and so she's getting more irritable with me. And then all of a sudden she shifted gears in her irritability. And she said to me, she said, you know what? They're going to turn you down anyway. So why bother asking for temporary residency? Ask for permanent. They're not going to give it to you anyway. So ask for the big one. Why go for the little one?
So she's challenging you now. She's challenging you now.
Totally.
She doesn't want to give you an inch, but she's challenged you to take a mile.
Yeah. And in a way, And in a way, she knows completely.
Yes.
In her mind, this will never happen anyway.
She's making a big joke out of you.
Yeah, it's a joke. She's
Yeah.
just making a joke. And in a way, she realizes somehow that if she gives me something here that in her mind is completely ridiculous,
Yeah.
then I'll leave. I will leave.
Yeah.
I'll get out of her space because I'm
Yeah.
irritating.
She wants to get rid of you.
Oh, easy. And it was funny because at that time, my Hebrew was almost like null and void, basically. So she helps me fill it out because, again, she didn't have the patience for me to sit there for an hour and try to do the Hebrew. So she fills it out and did a name and all this stuff. Okay, you're done. You're out of here. So I felt like I'd done what I was supposed to do. I walk out, and now I go back to Ilona on the kibbutz, and I said, okay, I put the request in. I have no idea when I'll get a response, but I have to stay here till I get a response. And so she ended up going back to Germany. We're in touch, writing letters and all this stuff. But it took 4 months until finally I get this little brown envelope in my mailbox, right, on the kibbutz. And it's not like, it's been 4 months. It's not like I would think about it every day for about a week, but then it starts to fade a bit. But then all of a sudden I see this envelope in my box and it looks official. It had one sentence, one little piece of paper, one sentence in Hebrew. It took me almost an hour to read it. To figure it out. And it was like, it just said, your request has been granted. Please bring your passport into the nearest interior's office. And I looked at it. Once I had figured it out, I'm shocked, but I don't trust myself enough in my Hebrew. So I take it to all my Israeli friends on the kibbutz and I show them. And they, at a glance, they look at it and they said, well, whatever it was that you asked, they've given it to you.
Permanent resident. Permanent resident.
What?
Permanent resident.
Yeah, well, see, it wasn't even that specific. It was just,
you got it.
Has been granted, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay. But I'll never forget, ever, walking out of the dining room of the kibbutz after they've really confirmed what was said on this note. And I'm walking back to my room and there was this, it was like this wave came over me. And I thought to myself, it wasn't just, wow, I get to stay in Israel or I'm staying in Israel. The overriding sense was, wow, he really speaks. This was really God. And I'm like, from that moment undid me. And it completely changed my whole perspective of my relationship with the Lord from that point on. So I'm over the moon with my little piece of paper. Next day early, I get on the bus, I go there. This 4 months, same woman, right? She's in her office and she's still grumpy. After 4 months, she's still grumpy and impatient. And it was so hard for me when I walked into the office and I saw that it was her, and I had my little piece of paper. It was so hard not to go, I got it. You said they wouldn't, blah, 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 and all this stuff, but I resisted. I took it to her, I showed her the piece of paper, and she looked at it, and I'm all excited. She takes it, crumbles it up into a ball, throws it in the trash can beside her desk. Doesn't say a single word to me, gets up and walks out of the office. And she just said one word as she's walking out. She said, it's a mistake. It's a mistake. And I'm doing this nose plant, this emotional nose plant. I want to get into the waste paper basket and get that little piece of paper out. She disappears until finally, after seemed like a long time, she comes back carrying a file, and she goes through the file. She's not even looking at me. She's just looking at these papers. And all of a sudden she says, I don't believe this. And I'm going, what? What is it that you don't believe? She said, they've given you permanent residency. She said, I have never, ever seen this happen in all the days I've been in this office. And she looked like she'd been there from day one, for sure. And it was like, she said, I have never, ever seen this happen. I just don't understand. And I'm pushing my passport a little bit closer to her. And I'm trying to be in my own sort of really like a little comforting. You know what? There'll be a lot of things we don't understand in life. Just stamp my passport. I am out here. You'll never have to meet with me ever again. I won't bother you again. Just stamp it. Stamp the passport. It seemed like a long time, but finally she pulls the passport or pulls this gigantic stamp out of her desk and nails my passport. And it's like I walked out of the office and out of that moment, and all of a sudden I'm like, this is incredible. This was really God. This is like, but at the same time, I felt this deep, deep place of, it was almost like this responsibility. It's like, I can never, ever, never say, no matter what this goes or what unveils itself as a result of this happening, I'll never be able to say this was not God or change or try and readjust it.
Right.
It ended up just like what we were saying. From that point on, it affected the next, up till this day, which still goes on, 42 years. The what? The sense of responsibility to this, it was like, it always is in this place of hearing from the Lord, because I'm not exactly a linguist or anything, but I look at it and I think the word is built right into the word responsibility as response.
Right.
It demands a response.
Right.
We have to respond to him. This is the thing that defines in our life for us, and for those that later will hear the story, that he's Lord. He's Lord. I gave my life to him. He's the one that's supposed to be ruling and reigning within my life, and not me. Not me anymore. And so it's like that moment in time for me has affected every single decision I've made from that point on.